wonderfully and awesomely made. God loves you just as you are, without conditions, no matter what you believe or who you love. If you know nothing else, I hope you know this simple truth. You are a child of God.
Reading from 1 Kings, chapter 19, verses 9 through 13. At that place Elijah came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." God said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?"
If you've tuned in with us in past Sundays when I've shared a message, it is pretty rare that I share a message centered around an Old Testament story. But today we're going to talk a little bit about Elijah, who I think has a lot to teach us about the voice of God. In the recent message series, we've been exploring the question God is, or the kind of statement God is, and putting in a number of ideas around God and figuring out whether or not those still apply in the modern world, or how they apply to our thinking. Today, I've pitched the idea that God is communicative, and we'll explore whether that's accurate and how we might look at our daily lives to try to find the voice of God. Now, getting back to Elijah, when we get to know Elijah in this particular story, he's at a very dark time in his story. He's wandering the wilderness, he is in hiding, and he's reached a moment of desperation where he has lost sight of God in all of this. Elijah is honestly a pretty interesting biblical figure who I think a lot of us would relate to if we looked at the time that he was navigating. He stepped into prophethood in a period of time when a false god, Baal, was sweeping his country, and Queen Jezebel was fanning the flames. If you're unfamiliar with her as a figure, honestly, I can say I think that she might have deserved her name going down in history the way that it did. He was in a pretty dark spot, and when I say that he was in a dark spot, Elijah had every intention of his life ending when he fled to the wilderness. In fact, he begged God for it to be so. But God did not answer his prayer. Instead, he guided him to food and water and sent him to the mount, where we find him in our story today. Now, I began attending church in earnest at about the same time that I was beginning to get to know myself for who I understood myself to be at the time. I was seeking something in a very dark time of life. It was in the pews on a particularly dark day that I asked myself, what if God could text us an answer to our prayers? And why doesn't he? Like Elijah, and I imagine many of us today often desire, I was seeking out a loud and momentous response to my prayers, especially my most earnest of prayers. If the stories of our prophets are anything to show, this isn't necessarily a new thing for humans or followers of God. And I don't think it's an unreasonable desire when we're talking about an all-powerful being. Now, God does answer Elijah, and I want to be clear. In my opinion, I think that it's pretty clear that this story is telling us that God was responsible for each of the acts of nature that's described in this story, but none of them were his answer to Elijah's prayer. It was in the moment of silence that a quiet whisper came through to Elijah. And this quiet whisper can be interpreted a lot of ways. We might say that God is telling us that we need to slow down and find his voice in the quietness. We might hear that God is not in destruction, but in the moment after. But I really think that what's being communicated here is that we need to seek God in the unexpected, that we need to stop expecting such a loud and momentous answer to our prayers. And here's the thing. I don't know if God got tired of the boneheadedness of humans or what, but just about a century later, God actually did send his most direct form of communication in the form of his son. To borrow some theology from Soren Kierkegaard, God chose to join us as a low-born human man dressed in rags for a reason. Instead of manifesting in his full divinity, he provided us everything we needed to know from the mouth of a man that we had no reason to believe. God created faith so that we could actively choose to do and be better, so that we might find his voice in these unexpected places. Now, I want to sprinkle a little bit of controversy in here. Jesus was not always perfect. In fact, a perfect Christ is boring and fails to provide us the necessary lessons that we can learn from. Even he had to learn to seek out the voice of our Father in unexpected places. In Mark chapter 7, verses 24 through 30, we witness Jesus meet a Syrophoenician woman. Now, to pause for a second, the Syrophoenicians or Canaanites were non-Jewish folks of the region whose ideology and religion stemmed mostly from Greek roots. Some accounts even describe the Syrophoenician woman as explicitly Greek. But let's note that regardless of that, this is an oppressed woman under the Empire of Rome, the very same empire that Jesus is opposing and combating. Now, the reason that I say that this is a little bit controversial is the fact that Jesus is not the picture of love and welcoming energy in this moment. Up until now, Jesus had been largely serving and protecting Jews, his people. Even if there were outcasts amongst his followers and those he healed, his only miracle in Gentile areas up until this point had worked with the spirits. It was about the herd of pigs, and he was mostly trying to call out hypocrisy more than provide healing or power to others. And here we witness the welcomer of outcasts compare a woman to a dog. Honestly, Jesus takes a fairly haughty stance, rebukes her, until she reminds him that he has power to spare. we witness as our greatest example of walking a godly path stumbles, has to reevaluate, and in my opinion, listen to the voice of God from a place he never expected it to be. It is after this interaction that we witness Jesus begin to set out on a path towards areas that were more non-Jewish, traditionally speaking. Did one woman change the entire path of our Messiah after being compared to a dog? Now, it was about a decade later that I finally got the answer to the question I had asked of why doesn't God text us? If in that decade I had accepted Kierkegaard's teachings that we need a distant God, and without that we are not making a true choice regarding faith. All the things. Until one day I got the chance to hear his voice. So it was a rough day. I had been going to my cousin's wedding, or so I thought. And unfortunately, everything kind of fell through. And so I was sitting at the bus stop, and I had just been sobbing. I was entirely non-social at the moment. And I was approached by an unhoused man. He was dirty. He was gross. I did not want him around. And honestly, the entire conversation was kind of laced with this grossness that I know a lot of feminine folks, especially, but people of all backgrounds have felt from somebody at some point. Anyways, the conversation that followed was something that I won't ever forget. He saw through my walls that I had put up. He acknowledged down to the very slouch that I had in my back, I was hiding something. And it was that conversation that ended up leading to me coming out for the first time to some of my friends as non-binary. And I have no doubt that the voice of God spoke through that man that day, a man that I would have never expected to hear it come from. So why couldn't that have been a text message? Why didn't God just text me? Well, aside from the fact that such a revelation would be too profound for us to continue to maintain any form of free will, sometimes we just have to learn things the hard way. Sometimes we have to slow down and listen to nature to hear the voice of God in the whispers around us. Or sometimes we have to have a conversation with the Syrophoenician, the homeless man, the person we thought we would never talk to. This week, I sat down with a group of people from a number of political backgrounds, and some of them were hardcore Republicans, and we were in a space that I wasn't entirely comfortable with, the Word of Life Church. But, maybe it's time that we, like Jesus, learned to walk in some unfamiliar territory. Perhaps, if anything is to be learned about the voice of God, it's that the answers to our prayers are rarely loud. And we should always be open to our answer coming in an unexpected way or from an unexpected place.
Thank you for joining us this morning for Just the Message. We hope to see you online or in person next time. From all of us at First Christian, God bless.